Hey friend, listen. I know the world is scary right now. Corruption, war, inflation, demographics, degeneracy, disease, unrest, hatred, and despair. We didn't come here to tell you how it is, but that it's going to get way better.
Got a good thing coming, and it's all I need. Everything I wanted, just wait and see.
Better by
It's a
Bitcoin.
good.
So groovy. It's growing
Every
on me.
time. Every time. You want to tee us up, in?
Sure. What we're talking about today is value in a world of eroding value. Basically, some things have gotten better. Some things have been designed better. You know, we now have very powerful computers and powerful iPhones. At the very same time, some things have gotten objectively worse from a quality standpoint. Specifically in the United States, we've forgotten how to manufacture things well. Some things are not manufactured in the US, and as a result, the craftsmen have been lost. And that's essentially what we're talking about today. How do we figure out what is actually valuable in a world where value has been eroded? So, do you guys have anything you want to add to that?
So one of the things that, just to continue to preface this, one of the things that we had before the call was like, you're trained, and why we titled this episode as it's titled is because you are literally trained from the moment you're born to consume.
Yeah.
You know, you exist not to create value, not to improve the world, not to do anything, but you are trained, you're brainwashed to consume, to just be a cog in the system that only consumes. For me personally, it's like, it took me at least a decade to try and like get out of that mentality as an adult. It was like, oh yeah, I'm working a job now, but really I'm sitting at my desk and drinking my latte or whatever the thing is, right? Like you see the LinkedIn videos of the person like walking through, and it's like, bro, you haven't done any work. You have contributed no value to society. You've literally just been consuming the LinkedIn offices, the LinkedIn lunches, the LinkedIn like juice maker, the LinkedIn, you're just going down the thing. You know, it's just like, this is not, no one here is creating value. It's all about consumption, and whoever plays the game the best gets to consume the most. And like, that's how you win the game. And it's like, why on earth is it set up like that? Not necessarily why. I mean, we know why, but like, it's so messed up. That's my addition.
Yeah, even taxes, right? If you think about it, as a business owner in the United States, you are given deferments or deductions based on consumption. You can go in and buy a camera or a truck or a building or whatever it is, and you get to depreciate based on the amount of consumption. And that only exists in a world where you have an inflationary currency, period. Because before we had this monetary structure that we were kind of born into, it's probably the best way to say it. You had to have things that were qualitative and quantitatively additive to society in order for you to actually be respected. Like let's take somebody who was an artist. If you painted the Sistine Chapel, your art form of like, hey, I can manipulate these pigments and turn these pigments into beautiful tapestries of artwork that people want to actually like sit there and look at, and kind of gives them an existential moment where they can ponder existence. You are adding value to society. And now with the, advent of AI, and it's no offense that, AI, I think there's a lot of really cool, interesting things about to happen, but now the value addition you're doing is a completely new and wide open frontier again, because now we actually have to ask the question, what is value? And is having, 47,000 versions of the movie Back to the Future valuable? I don't know.
No.
I want to state, I don't want to go back to a world pre-iPhones. I love having a smartphone. I love having very, very fast internet. I'm excited by the future of AI. there are just other things that now we need to tackle fixing and making better. I'll give a couple examples. Something I think about a lot is how many cars I've had in my life. You go and buy a car, and if you buy a new car at 50,000 or 60,000 miles, there's going to be some maintenance. At 100,000 miles, you have to change the timing belt. There comes a certain point where the car is just, it's worthless at that point, and you might as well just get rid of it, give it to whoever wants to buy an old used car, go get a new car, start all over. I've done that 5 or 6 times in my life. Why can't a car be made where the component, when the component wears out, you pop a new component on and you essentially rebuild the car over time and you have a fresh car? Well, an auto manufacturer doesn't want that. They have to put out new inventory and have you buy the new models. And there's planned obsolescence in all of our appliances and in our electronics. And another thing, just one more real quick. I live in a neighborhood in Los Angeles where almost every house on my street is either an Aladdin home or a Sears home. What those were, it was essentially like IKEA for homes. You would look in a catalog, you'd find the home you wanted. A truck would come, dump all the lumber, all the plumbing, all the electricity, all the wiring on your lot, and you would build your house by yourself. This is something that's almost unimaginable to us today. Like nobody I know thinks about building their own house with their bare hands, unless you're talking about a tiny house. But these houses aren't tiny houses. They're beautiful. They're really sought after. Every house on my street is $1 to $3 million now. It's the same house. It's 100 years old. Why is that not being done anymore? Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
They probably threw the instructions out. They're like, I'll figure it out.
yeah, exactly.
Well,
go
on.
ahead. No,
I was just gonna say, like, there's also this weird amount of specificity to everything. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever read East of Eden, but in East of Eden, they talk about how, one of the guys, I forget the name of the characters, Samuel knew him. Maybe he was like Samuel's cousin or something like that. But he went to Stanford at the turn of the century and was like getting into advertising. Wait a second, we need advertising because, why do you need advertising? Everyone knows that, like, the horse goes to there. This is what a horse does. You don't need to advertise a horse, right? Like, this is what the grain does. We know, like, you don't need to advertise the grain. But because of the expansion of civilization and all the different things that are out there and how the weird little components that make things better in weird various ways, you all of a sudden need advertising to tell a story of like why this thing exists, or to explain it to somebody. You're going to have, 20% better XYZ, right? Which you wouldn't know otherwise. So the thing that's fascinating about that for me is that, like, there's this crazy amount of specificity. And when the specificity explodes, everyone just gets overwhelmed with everything. And so when you look and try and build a house, well, I know an electrician who's telling me, like, no, he could like build basically anything. And he's like, yeah, except for maybe when I come to a house, I wouldn't try and build a house because it's too crazy. It's like, what? Really? 100 years ago, you could literally have a house shipped to you on the back of a truck in pieces, and you'd build it over the course of the next couple weeks or months or whatever. It's like, it's bonkers.
I think one thing to that, though, is actually the problem with eroding value is everyone's trying to figure out where they can add it. And the issue is the government. The government cannot add value if they don't give you boundaries. And so you have now all of these inspectors and inspections and building codes, and not saying that they're all bad. I would say that there's probably, I know in a lot of different parts of LA, they're trying to protect historic homes, and, there's different ways you can feel on that. But the thing is if you are an entity trying to add value and the only way you add value is by adding obstacles, there's the problem. And I think that's one of the issues that we've started to come up against with, a society of eroding value that's predicated on, the foundation of our monetary system or our value system, the money. Because we don't have a monetary foundation that's additive in value, but it is kind of, destructive in value, because it is literally stealing and destroying value. It forces you to think about how you can extract value as quickly as possible versus adding value for as long as possible. And that lensing is really important because you have a high time preference. And for people who don't know, high time preference is fast. Low is slow and high is fast. You have a very high time preference because you need to go spend that money. It's burning a hole in your pocket because it's not going to be as valuable by the time you would go to spend it if you were to sit on it for a couple days. And so I think we're seeing an interesting resurgence with SpaceX as an example. Elon's goal is a multi-millennial society and civilization for humanity. It is the lowest time preference idea you can have. And his idea for that is spawning off all these other companies. Like, people don't realize, but the goal of getting to Mars, that's where Tesla came from. Because in order to get to Mars, you need to have electric vehicles. The goal of getting to Mars is where SpaceX came from. The goal of getting to Mars is where the Boring Company came from, because you're going to actually need to be creating these underground, air-proof civilizations to a degree to be able to to go between the different habs that they're going to put on Mars. And so all these things are actually focused on a single goal, Optimus. But because his goal is actually outside of the monetary system, it's built on a foundation of a low time preference idea. It's super constructive. And so I'm curious, do you guys think, where are we right now? Like, can we ever get back to that?
There's a Bible verse. It's a proverb that says, "A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children." I got to throw the boomers a little bit under the bus on this one. Their generation does not live that way at all. So many boomers have zero intention of leaving anything to their kids. They lived and planned for a retirement that would let them essentially vacation and spend their money to zero and just have enough for them. And I don't know if 100 years ago, if people were actually planning on, like the house that I'm living in right now, this house was built over 100 years ago. I don't know if the person who built this house was thinking 3, 4, 5 generations. There's probably been 5 generations that have lived in this house so far. But I do know, when I look at the buildings in downtown LA, the new ones that go up, I cannot imagine those buildings even lasting 30 years. They're essentially, they seem like they're just made to last long enough to where, I don't know if you take a mortgage out on a skyscraper, I don't know how they finance these things, but it seems like they're made to last just long enough to pay off the financing to sell it to the next person. And so we need a generational change speaking of value, we need a generation to have values, to value passing things on to the next generation again. And I have hope that our generation is feeling that right now.
Yeah. The idea that you should be creating value in your life, for me, is like huge. And it literally takes, considering all the brainwash we've gone through, it takes you a long time to actually process it, internalize it. Like, am I actually adding value here? And like aligning everything in your life, like trying to figure out a way where it's like, no. If I'm not adding value, there should be consequences for that. Or if I'm not adding value, like what? Like, how do I know I'm even adding value? Right? I think Safety talks about this. He's like, if you're young, the best thing you can do is figure out how to improve the value of other people in your life, like add value to the world, because that's going to return to you later on. When you're old, it's super hard to do. Like, we're all super old now. It's much harder for us to add value if we haven't been training for the last however many years to try and do that. But like, we've been literally brainwashed to not add value, and just recognizing that as step one. Step two is like, you have to figure out, like, you have to learn some skill that's a desirable skill, not like a completely great example of like a brainwashed consumption mindset is like go to college to study women's studies or transgender studies or something that's like you literally invent the major while you're there. Like you have invented the major. Like you who know nothing are deciding that you are going to put this value into the world. Like it makes no sense. That is not creating value for anybody. It's like the complete opposite of creating value. It's literally just you consuming a college degree and then graduating and thinking that you'll be creating value working at whatever thing, but you're not. You're just consuming the value at the thing. You're just continuing the cycle of consuming value. So you have to retrain yourself. Start with recognizing that you're not creating any value, and then like try and get feedback from people. Is this valuable? JD, you do this all the time, which is fantastic. So I love you for this. You ask people like, hey, what do you need? Hey, how can I help? Hey, like, does this help? Like, hey, how are we doing? Like, is this a good idea? Like, here's some more ideas if this one wasn't that great. Like, you're just constantly trying to add value, and it's definitely, it adds value. And then you're training yourself to think that way. So you're adding value because you are training yourself to add value and just it turns into a cycle. It's awesome. But you have to break the brainwashing. So
I think what's interesting is we were talking about this before, but it's the idea of transcendent like storytelling, but it's transcendent value. Like I thought about transcendental stories, right? Like the Bible. Like the Bible can add value to your story, to your life, like the story of your life, whether you're a Christian or not. It's just so chock full of wisdom. But I'm actually curious your take on this, Anson, because that is your craft, right? Your craft is storytelling. But I'm curious, how you approach it in the current world, because some of the topics you've covered in the films you've done, I'm not saying that they're not long-term topics, but they are a little more, contemporary. And so I'm curious, is there an angle that when you guys are either breaking these stories or thinking through how you would do it, was it to kind of like call something out and be like, hey, this is not the direction modernity should be going. And so if we can ridicule it, we can maybe get it back on the right track for a longer term thing? Or were you guys thinking of it more of, just in the way you've been programmed of like, all right, we need to, tell a story, get maybe some laughs. And so it was like, maybe unintentionally a little higher time preference than maybe you would have liked.
Yeah, I was laughing as Bondor was talking about like willing your major into, I don't know how you described it, but I was a film major. So yeah, I have a little guilt over that. Like, what value am I adding to the world? But I do look at film as a calling, and just personally, I am trying to add value to the world through film. I feel like there is a purpose in the type of films that I'm making. They're not just pure entertainment. They are made to motivate and inspire and help people to be better through the experience of watching a movie. Because movies do, especially, I've done mostly documentaries, but especially narrative scripted film, I feel like you're more likely to have a significant change in your life after watching a movie like Shawshank Redemption or, I don't know, Forrest Gump or something, than you are watching a documentary. There's great documentaries out there, but it just stimulates something different, a fictional film. For people who don't know, I did the movies No Safe Spaces with Adam Carolla and Dennis Prager, and then I did What is a Woman with Matt Walsh, and I did Am I Racist with Matt Walsh. And maybe a topic like transgenderism isn't a totally evergreen thing, or maybe the battle for free speech seems to be this pendulum thing that swings back and forth. I also just recently did one for PragerU called Laughter on Lockdown. But yeah, I'm trying to, I guess, defend my own filmmaking a little bit, to just say we are trying to change the culture and better the culture through our filmmaking. Specifically for the Matt Walsh movies, though, I was just focused on making a really funny movie about the subject matter. And I think comedy is one of the hardest genres of movie making. And if you can genuinely make people laugh out loud, there's something healing about that. And so if the culture is broken and you're making a movie to shed light on a subject matter and hopefully change people's opinions to some degree, the best possible way to do that is through laughter. So that was more my purpose in those movies. And yeah, I think especially What Is a Woman, I feel like it's funny because the transgenderism thing, maybe it's not the most evergreen topic, but I feel like that movie's a near masterpiece for a documentary.
I think it's great. I think you did a solid job, and I'm very curious though. Your is there a thing going forward where it's like, I really hope to do X, like really want to inspire people, or really want to because I do think making people laugh I think comedy is the highest of all the art forms, because you're right, is the most difficult. It is so difficult to get people to laugh because you kind of have to meet them on this journey where it's like they're going this way and you're going this way, and you kind of have to hit them at that point and then just like push them in a brand new direction and kind of like, rejigger it. And whether it's a dark comedy or whether it's just kind of like calling out the cultural stuff like you guys are doing, what and let me actually get to a question here. But in the current society with AI and all this stuff coming up and eroding value, do we need to have a complete cultural reset to actually get towards like great filmmaking or even great music, right? Like classical music had so much like math in it, right? Like you can look at it and look at the ways these things were made, whether or not they were thinking about the math when they were making these, these great orchestral pieces. But do you think we need like a full reset in terms of like culture and money before we can actually get on the right path?
Bondor, do you have anything to say? Because I have something to say on this, but I'll let you go if you want.
Real quick, I think, or hopefully I can get it across quick. But I don't think we have a reset or a hard reset. I think when you look at it, it's been a slow degradation in value over the last 100 years. And you can kind of pin it to the turn of the century, start of the Federal Reserve Bank. Now, every generation that has basically traditionalism was the MO, apart from very small sects of liberalism that were, that served a decent purpose. But traditionalism was essentially it. Everybody was traditional. You had a traditional family, you had a traditional relationships, you had traditional friendships, traditional schooling, traditional, like everything, right? The first generation to come out of the Fed was the Roaring 20s. It's a different boomer. The jazz age, the Roaring 20s.
The Lost Generation, or is that the
zoot suits and all the they basically said, well, wait a second, we can kind of do way more with this traditionalism. We don't have to I'm a girl, I can just go out on the town if I wanted to. Like, you couldn't do that before.
The Lost Generation, yeah. Ernest Hemingway, Gertrude Stein, yeah. World War I.
So, yeah. But then that generation becomes the parents of the next generation. And so the generation's like, yeah, it was great that we got to go out on the town. I hope you get to go out on the town. Or I hope you get to go further. Or, whatever the next thing is. You can actually see it, like you can literally see it or listen to it in music. You brought up a music example. You go from orchestra and folk music to big band to a rock and roll style band, like think Elvis. And then you go to a more what we understand as rock and roll, like Rolling Stones or the Beatles. And then you go to, well, we don't even need the band at all. Like, right. We started with an orchestra and we're now at the place where we don't even need a band. We're just going to sample things. We're gonna do hip hop and we're going to sing over it. And then you get into electronica where it's like, no, you don't even need live instruments at all. You don't even need to sit. You don't even need to be able to perform in any way. You just press play and everyone goes crazy. So there's this slow generational decline. And each generation, like in particular with the case of music, I think it's fascinating. In the case of music, it's just awesome because each generation hated the next generation's music. My great grandparents hated the fact that my parents liked the Beatles. My parents hated the fact that I listened to whatever random rock song or rap song that was on the radio. That's inappropriate. You can't be listening to that. Right. And it's just like, wait a second, that's 3 generations, and you can just kind of extrapolate. Sorry, this is a really long-winded answer, Anton, but I don't think there is a flip the switch reset or anything. I think it's the incentives in the system, and when you switch the incentives, people start pushing the other way.
Culture is so important, and not all cultures are equal. Cultures can be very different. Some cultures can be way worse than others. Some are better in some ways. Going back to movies real quick, when you watch the movie Stand By Me as a kid, aside from what the story of Stand By Me is about, you want to go hang out with your friends and go venture off in the woods and walk down railroad tracks and jump in a pond and tell jokes with each other. When you watch The Sandlot, you want to go play a game of pickup baseball. Is that what you call it? Baseball? When it's on a sandlot? You want to make s'mores. You want to build something out of an erector set. And I think about cultures, and mountaineering is very important. Ocean exploration is really important. Not every culture around the globe values those things. And so people need to be inspired, and especially kids need to be regularly inspired. And I'm not going to say that just because these things that are, have to do with getting outdoors are important. I think the VR world also is great. The internet is great. Writing code is great. You just have to have a balance. And especially for kids, they just need to be inspired so that they even know how to balance these things out. So they know that if they put on a VR headset and they play with their friends in the virtual world, they should take it off at a certain point and go get on their bike and ride and go play with friends in real life. And very easily, generations can lose sight of what is truly valuable. And part of what has made that happen is essentially fiat money. Our culture has degraded as our money has degraded. So as far as Bitcoin is concerned, if Bitcoin truly is better money and is hard money and is going to reset the system, then we have an opportunity to reestablish values. And so you need people like filmmakers and people that are making art and storytellers to help inspire the next generation and basically tell them what is valuable. And so, yeah, and I think that's what we're doing here. And that's what, it's kind of what we're all about.
Yeah. They don't want you to be valuable, because if you are not valuable in and of yourself, you can be controlled. Period. If they are telling you where and how to add value, they can control you. They can control your effort. They can control anything and everything that they want. It's one of, I think, the greatest tragedies about abortion and of all these other things is they are telling you that your unborn child is not valuable. And they've convinced you of it. They've convinced people that there is a binary, and that binary starts as soon as the baby has passed through the vaginal canal of it is not a baby and now it is a baby. Whereas, if you would take any understanding of basic science or biology to the animal kingdom, that would not be the case. And so it's really interesting, C.S. Lewis talked about the battle for language. And I think that's a world where you cannot cede any ground whatsoever. I posted earlier this week about the stuff going on with Bitcoin right now, about the book If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, right? That's literally what's happening in Bitcoin world right now. And that's also what happened, though, with the Creature from Jekyll Island, is, you gave these bankers and these senators and all of these, people who had authority at the time, the small cookie of, oh yeah, we'll let you, it sounds like a good idea that we should have a group of people trying to make sure the economy can constantly grow. That sounds like a great idea. I don't face value sounds great. But in actuality, economic and ecological systems are way too complicated for anybody to control. There are too many unknowns like earthquakes or asteroids, weather in general, and just accidents. And so I think one of the biggest things we need to come to terms with as humans is that the greatest way you can add value is to actually understand that you're adding value.
Did you lose him?
I don't
JD,
know,
we,
just lost. I
we
think we just
completely
lost
lost
your
your audio.
audio. Yeah,
Perfect.
no audio on JD. I'll jump in until JD gets back. I think that one of the things that I think, Anton, you mentioned this, and JD, you definitely touched on this as well, but it's the idea of like, with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you and more. And that's 100. That's it right there. That's literally the words of Jesus telling us what's happening. With the measure you use to measure value, uses it to, this is not strictly applicable to value. It's applicable to a whole bunch of other stuff. But with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you and more. If you measure value with a currency that debases in value, that's going to return to you. You will be debased. Your value will be debased. Your civilization will be debased. And it's just, for me, that's the crux of the whole thing. And it really, for me, also is the perfect segue to how does it get better? How do we see it get better? How does Bitcoin make this better? And Bitcoin does not devalue in nature. Therefore, when you measure in Bitcoin, it returns to you. And it's not only that you were not devalued, it's that, a righteous judgment of value returned to you. But then there's more, right? So we're talking about, we got you now, JD. So we're talking about the reversal of the destruction of value in civilization, because we now have, we're measuring rightly, so we're going to get back rightly and more. And it's like, bro, this is it. It's awesome.
It's probably pretty confusing to people who haven't really done a whole lot of research about Bitcoin, why that is the case. I think it's just like me kind of looking out at the sea of people who are not like us and haven't fallen down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and studied and studied and studied. We all are pretty confident that over time, Bitcoin isn't only going to preserve value, it's actually going to grow in value because it's scarce and the value is being eroded out of all these other things that maybe seem like they're preserving value, whether it's real estate, whether it's the gold, whether it's bonds, pensions. And we realize that Bitcoin having a fixed supply, having nobody who wants to control it, all these people, they would love to increase the supply and do what the Federal Reserve does to our currency, but they can't. And so all of these different things that now are how we preserve value are going to start breaking off a piece of themselves, like the gold market, and putting it into Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin, the value is literally going to go up over time. We're all very confident that that is going to happen. And a lot of people can't, they just can't wrap their mind around it. And part of the reason why they can't wrap their mind around it is because we've had over like 111 years of the Federal Reserve System, and people just have never seen anything that they can compare it to. So, I mean, we're doing our part to tell people that you can preserve, not just preserve your value, but have your value grow simply by having a low time preference, not buying a bunch of poorly manufactured junk and trying to just burn through your money, and instead creating value, taking that value, putting it into Bitcoin, and just chilling out and enjoying seeing your value increase over time.
I think it actually gets better too when, I have a very specific take on the op return stuff, but my take is people need to care about other people. And I think the most important thing about Bitcoin is if you are only operating within your own or for yourself, if you're only self-interested, that is the best way for you to interact with Bitcoin. But it's also one of the worst ways to interact with Bitcoin. And so what I mean by that is if you're not thinking about that proverb that you brought up of, leaving something for your children's children or leaving a better world for your children's children, we run the risk of losing this. This is actually the only time this has ever been tried. And, we're still in the infancy and we're still not out of the woods. We're still in this place where we're figuring it out. It's the digital age. This is kind of like that moment where people finally invented bronze armor and like, cool, we're going to go fight those guys who have sticks now. Maybe this will be better. And it was better. And then the Iron Age came. And so it's like, we're kind of in the first iteration of how this works. And as we know with like the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, and then we had the Industrial Revolution, all these things just were additive and they kept building and building and building and getting better and better. And so I don't know if Bitcoin's going to look like what it looks like now 50 years from now or 100 years from now. But I think what's cool is we have this opportunity to try and actually have a deflationary currency for the first time in human existence that can't be futzed with if we can get everybody to agree that that is a core fundamental truth of value that transcends time is valuable. And I think if we can get people to agree on that, then they'll set their sights on super low time preference activities like building cathedrals again, building products that actually last without planned obsolescence. I want to make this thing that actually lasts forever, which I do actually think you see with Tesla, right? Tesla just makes one thing and they don't brand it as this new thing. You don't have to upgrade every year. They just push software updates. And so I think the digital age is actually really, really poised to move people towards a low time preference again.
Can I say one more thing on this? Because you just brought up something that what we're doing is we are telling the story of Bitcoin. We are establishing the culture for Bitcoin. And in the same way that we saw the block size war, you had a group of people, you had on Reddit, you had RBTC, which were the people who ended up going with Bitcoin Cash, a worthless altcoin scam, essentially. And then you had our Bitcoin, which was pushing for what is Bitcoin today. And we have a similar thing happening right now in Bitcoin. So people need to be taught the real values are. I'm going to use the dumbest example ever because I've been itching to talk about it. It's just what I'm into right now. I've gotten into a rabbit hole of the restoration of vintage bicycles. Most of them were made in the US, and there are these people on YouTube who are essentially rescuing bike frames off of Facebook Marketplace, and then they're fixing them up, adding value, and then they're reselling them to people. And now people get a fixed up, perfect bicycle that is literally better than a bicycle that you could go buy at a bicycle shop for thousands of dollars. It only cost them $500. But the thing is, why would somebody go buy this old 90s bicycle when they didn't value it before? But because of the popularity of these YouTube channels, they're being taught to value something that is actually valuable. And that's what we're doing. And what more Bitcoiners need to do, we need to teach people what the values of Bitcoin are and just continue to tell the story of Bitcoin and spread this message. And that is how Bitcoin will continue to exist in 50 years. I don't know if that may be a horrible analogy, but
no, it makes sense.
It's a good one.
It's the low time preference stuff. Like, I mean, the up return stuff is like there. You can kind of see it in the cultural as the cultural debate. Just that alone, right? Where there's people who are like, no, we want this to have a low time preference, And then there's the other side of the debate that's like, no, we want wizard dick pics. It's like these like MS Paint picture, like it's hard to paint a picture of the disparity there. People who have embraced low time preference versus the people who have embraced and have just been brainwashed by fiat for high time preference, consumption, right? Like that's really, that kind of sets a standard. One of those is literally just a fiat paradigm that they're trying to continue fiat. We just want fiat all over again. Fiat, all the way down. Bright, shiny colors, turn your mind off, consume as much as you can, eat, like get the sticky fingers, like it's just fiat all the way down, right? The other side is like, no, wait, if we actually are deliberate, and if we plan, and if we think about long-term consequences, and if we organize and design accordingly, we're going to have real opportunities that are like going to really like shape civilization. We're going to be, as JD said, we're going to be set like, wait a second, we're going to be set up to, it's not just going to be that, well, maybe we'll be able to build cathedrals again. It's going to be like, no, every town is going to start building cathedrals because that's what everybody in every town is going to want to do. That's the low time preference culture, right? It's not just one guy. It's not an Elon Musk being like, I'm going to be the guy who goes to Mars. It's like, no. Everybody in culture thinking like that. Every single person. That's what Bitcoin does. It literally changes it completely from the ground up, changes who you are, what you think about, all the stuff. For me personally, I mean, I've told this story before. I grew up listening to, as I mentioned, rap, hip hop, rock, and then I got super into electronic dance music, and I DJ'd for a long time and produced and the whole rest of it. Since I've gotten into Bitcoin, at some point there was a shift where it was like, wait a second, none of this is actually interesting as music anymore. And I just have basically just been listening to classical music ever since. It like literally changes your time preferences about what you consume and culture, like, oh, actually I was just thinking about this, like, this is actually just boring to listen to now versus, oh, this is interesting. Like they're doing some interesting stuff. I've never heard something like this before. It really changes how you think about the world and how you participate in the world. And it goes back to, how do you create value? Well, if you've just been like, if you listen to the same thing over and over on repeat, electronic dance music, versus something where you're constantly being challenged about all sorts of new interesting things, well, how are you going to be able to create value? Well, it's easy because you have so much bigger, larger repertoire to pull from, right? They are not trying to shut you down with their just monotonous brainwashing. You can then have an original thought, have an original idea, like create something for somebody that they didn't know they needed, or that they've been trying to do themselves but weren't able to, like, because you now have a larger skill set, a larger, jumping pad to jump off from. And Bitcoin does all of that. It's unbelievable.
Having a long-term mindset or a low time preference proclivity changes how you think. And so I'm curious for you guys, like, how has Bitcoin changed how you think?
I was just thinking it would be super interesting to hear different Bitcoiners talk about, after discovering Bitcoin and really learning about it, how certain patterns change. The same way for Bondor, his musical taste changed. For me, I hear people talking about the latest series, and there's some great series on, Apple TV, Netflix, Amazon, whatever. I just don't have any interest in watching pop culture stuff for whatever reason. And for me, I've wanted to basically read really old books and watch older classic films. And that's pretty much all I'm interested in right now. And I don't know. I don't find as much value in the current stuff that's being made. And I have a feeling that a lot of Bitcoiners are having a similar experience in all kinds of different forms of art,
absolutely,
and intellectual stuff.
Absolutely. You literally just start to see like almost like the scales fall from your eyes, right? You start to see, oh, well, that song is literally just the same song as the one that came out the year before, or that politician is literally the same platform that his opponent had 4 years before. Like, we're literally dealing with the same. It's like all of it's just, you're just somehow the fiat world is just blind to all of it. But when you become a Bitcoin, your time preference is lower a little bit. You think a little bit more. You're like, wait a second, I was into that garbage. Like, how was I into that garbage? That's crazy, right?
Do you have one, JD? Have you had a similar experience?
The biggest
Well,
thing
JD's
for me,
a baby Bitcoiner, so he might not be.
I
able
am
to-
a baby
These things
Bitcoiner.
take a long
coming.
time. Like, it really does take a long time.
I will say the biggest shift for me moving to a low time preference mode of thinking is embracing pain. And so what I mean by that is I started taking cold showers. And taking cold showers has been the single most transformative thing I've done in my life. I can have a really crappy day and go take a cold shower, and I force myself. Like, it's not fun. Like, cold showers are not fun, right? But the discipline of standing there and just freezing yourself out for a minute and just focusing on your breath, because the only way to get through a cold shower is to focus on your breath. You kind of have to get rid of everything else and just center yourself and then just stand there. And then, for me, I'm like, all right, this is the least comfortable position. Do that. It continues to remind me that no matter how bad something can go, I can do it, I can get through it, and I can find a way to win. It's it. And I think that has been so helpful. I'm not perfect at it. I'm still having moments where, without vision, the people perish. And so I'm doing a lot of like vision seeking right now of what do I want to be doing and how do I want to be adding to this world. I think the biggest thing for me is I do want to be telling Bitcoin stories and helping people move into a higher version of themselves with a lower time preference mindset and stories to kind of move you, lore to move you in that way. But it's not easy. Every day is a battle. But having a low time preference mindset or a long-term vision for the future that can be better for your kids and your kids' kids that you will never experience, it's interesting because you realize it's like, oh, it's the butterfly effect. My cold shower today that sucked might make the world a better place tomorrow.
Yeah, I think one thing that's coming to mind now you're saying that, did I just lose it again? I got to pay more attention to my own thoughts.
I have something if you want to take a second.
Go for it. Yeah.
I was just going to say, as far as leaving inheritance to your children's children, it's hard for me to imagine Bitcoin 2 generations from now. It's just hard for me to picture it because Bitcoin has only been around for not even half of my life. So I'm like, how could it be around 2 generations from now? Like, what are computers going to look like? What's the internet going to look like? So I'm just being honest. That's just how I feel. But when I think about actual inheritance, what the process of inheritance looks like as a US citizen, of taking an amount of money and then giving it to your children. How do you divvy it up between your children? How much of it is the state going to capture as a death tax or an inheritance tax? Well, with Bitcoin, I literally took some Bitcoin and I put it on a couple open dimes a while ago. I can't remember how much I put on it. And I just made an open dime for each of my children. They will be able to take that Bitcoin. It's a quiet asset. Nobody knows it exists. And then
apart from everybody online now, but
yeah, everybody knows. Maybe I'm talking theoretically. I don't know. Maybe I'll lose them. Maybe they fell in a lake. I don't know. But gold, gold has been the same way where, if you had a gold coin, you could give it to your kid, but it does at least give you the power to have an inheritance that is not with a trusted third party that you can literally give to your children or your grandchildren with nobody else being involved. And aside from gold, that hasn't really existed ever before. And that's just cool.
So I got my point now. JD, you mentioned this Anton, you're skirting around this as well. And the point is, like, why? Who cares about low time preference? Like, who cares about high time preference? We all live in a postmodern world. It's all just postmodern. Nothing matters. You, whatever you do, it's cool for you. And it's like, no, 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 no. You're not getting it if you're coming at it from that angle. What we're talking about is adding meaning to your life. Postmodernism is devoid of meaning. There is no meaning in your life. And part of that is because of high time preference. When your time preferences are high, all you can think about is me here now, drugs, sex, violence. Like, just, there is no tomorrow, or maybe there is. I don't know. We're gonna roll the dice and see. But when you think on low time preference, all of these things have meaning all of a sudden. It deeply matters what you do. It deeply matters that you add value to people's lives. It deeply matters how you spend your time. And, well, wait a second. Like me, a millennial who grew up in a postmodern society and like went through all of that, brainwashed by all of us, like, well, there's no meaning. Just do whatever you want, whatever, it's all good. But all of that, you lose the value. There's no more value anymore if that's what you want to believe. But if you lower your time preferences, you start thinking about kids, you start thinking about long-term stable relationships, right? All of a sudden, so much more of life just has meaning, and there's purpose, and there's reason to get up. There's reason to get up early, and even earlier than that, right? It's like so much stuff just starts to connect about who we are and what are we doing here. It's really incredible. And failing to go through these things and like failing to see it is just like wasting your time, wasting your life. Unbelievable.
Yeah, the greatest waste of the current era is human potential. Period. Because we have been trained that what we do doesn't matter. We're told that we'll never buy a house. We're told that we'll never make enough money. We're told that we'll never get that car or whatever it is. And the truth is, you don't need the house. You don't need the car. You don't need any of that. What you need is to figure out where you can add value and who you can add value to. And that starts with who's directly around you. You should be adding as much value as possible to your family. You should be adding as much value as possible to your community. And you should be adding as much value as possible to your friends. Because at the end of the day, that is literally what this is all about. We will all be stories when it's said and done. That's it. We will just be stories. We tell stories of George Washington. We tell stories of Jesus. We tell stories of all that in this world. You know, we will go to, you know, the next world in heaven and all that. But in this world, we will only be stories. And so the most important realization is a low time preference makes your story matter.
Oh, Anton, you
I'm thinking about people who they're basically forced because the world is getting more and more expensive around them. Inflation is outpacing the increase of their income, and they're desperate, and they're having to just work more hours in order to live. They're having to live further away from where they work and commute in. And high time preference makes you gravitate towards things that are easy and convenient because you just don't have the time to put in the time for things that are more valuable. And so rather than smoking a brisket for 15 hours, you had to commute to work. You're going to grab an Uncrustable out of the freezer rather than making a delicious pour over coffee out of good beans and grinding them and weighing it out. You're going to grab an energy drink and pop a Zyn in your mouth and probably have an Adderall prescription and not exercise and then sit in your car for hours. And it just degrades the quality of your life as you're desperately just trying to keep up. And, you know, the value of Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin has to go up over time for all this to work out. And so, you know, check back in a few years if my predictions about this have been correct. But my understanding, my belief, where all of my research has led me is that by living a more modest lifestyle, by adding value to the world and taking a little bit of the money that I make for my labor and continuing to invest it in Bitcoin, the price of Bitcoin is going to go way up over time. And eventually I'm going to have more time to do the things that I want to do. And as I have time to think about that, then I can decide what is truly valuable. And I can live in a way that's a little bit slower paced, where I'm doing the things that are healthier, better for my brain, better for my family, better for my relationships. And Bitcoin is going to enable us to do that. And it's one of our greatest hopes as far as money goes, and as far as our, you could call it your retirement or however you want to label it. Bitcoin gives us that hope for a future, and that's a beautiful thing.
And it's hardly a hope either. It's like, I'm a real person who has really experienced the things that I'm telling you about how Bitcoin makes it better. This is not like just pie in the sky. We think it's going to work out this way. It's like, wait a second. No. This is actually real. Like, I have time to think about these things. Like, it
already has made it better too.
Yeah, it's already better. It's incredible. So, yeah.
I think if we get properly onto a Bitcoin standard in the United States, there is a resurgence of trains. And I'm excited for this new generation of, and I know there's the whole 15-minute city thing, right? I think that can come about in a positive way versus the negative fiat way. The negative fiat 15-minute city is where you can be locked down perpetually and you can be destroyed and just totally co-opted, and all of your effort and time and everything, washed away and flushed down the toilet of whatever oligarch is in control. The low time preference city is one that, you can still stretch your arms out and you can have yours, whatever that is, your place to be. But people are not going to enjoy being stacked on top of each other. They're just not going to. And so the cities are going to have to evolve in such a way where you're going to think about, okay, the way I can best add value is over here. And so I can go to this place that's manufacturing something or coding something or whatever it is. And so I think we're going to see more of an appreciation for, and as I say this, it's not going to be trains. It's going to be self-driving cars. That's what it's going to be, because you don't need to put in the infrastructure. You just need to, put the actual automobile on wheels and they can go. And I think that's what's
or just cool. Straight teleportation too. We could just skip all that and just go straight to teleportation.
I think that would be awesome as well. But the net is what the low time preference world is going to bring is more time to think about the infinite. And that is going to bring about a lot more positive change in my mind for everyone in a lot of good ways.
Yep. There's going to be way more because there's more thinking about the infinite. There's going to be way more thinking about ethics, morality, my limitedness. Going to be thinking about God. We're going to be thinking like the last 200 years of atheism kind of running the show, and also human secularism, just like not having any answers for anybody about anything, completely meaningless existence for everyone all the time, is ultra high time preference. And when you use an economic force to push people into that and force them to have low time preferences, what you're going to have, wait a second, this is all garbage, bogus anyway. And you look at the science, you look at the math, you look at all the whole thing, arguments on top of arguments on top of arguments for the existence of God. Who is God? And you go down all the other rabbit holes and it just turns into, wait a second, my life has purpose. Wait a second, all these things matter. I got to start doing stuff. I got to start making a difference. I got to start, get married, have kids, like be a good father all of a sudden, right? Stop doing drugs, stop like drunk driving, stop all the crazy things that stop doing wizard dick pics, like all the whole thing. And it's all coming through because of Bitcoin and what it does to time preferences and civilization. Ultimately, it's going to be incredible.
Yeah. Like JD, you were saying that, there'll be a resurgence of trains. And you were saying that we might all live in a smaller place, but it won't be like the 15-minute city in the sense of you can be locked down and you have to live in a certain place and you're over-regulated. Think about that, the little island in France, Mont Saint Michel, that gets cut off by the tides, has the cathedral at the top of it. What's the difference between that and a Soviet bloc era apartment? I mean, they both house people. They're both like little self-contained villages. But in a future where there's a Bitcoin standard, people will be able to choose to live in their own villages or their own citadels. There will be such a thing as like a luxury train as opposed to a crappy city bus. It's just a more beautiful future that Bitcoin is going to enable as soon as this inflationary fiat dies.
Yeah. And I think we're going to get back to a world of the handshake. I think we're going to get back to a world where, your effort matters, your word matters, and nobody's going to be perfect. People are going to make mistakes, but it's going to be really important to think about these things. Right now we're all putting our handshake of our word on the internet, and we're probably going to fall short of some things. Hopefully not, right? But the net of that is people are going to be able to find other people that are trying to lead the way out of the darkness and lead it into a much better way. And I think that's bodes well for Los Angeles, that bodes well for America, that bodes well for the world. Just don't screw it up.
This takes us to the top of the hour, guys. One thing I would, me personally, just the final thought I'd say is, for anybody listening, tell everybody inflation, suffering from inflation is a choice. You do not have to suffer from inflation. You can stop suffering from inflation like today, like right now. It may take years for that to play out fully, but you can start today.
And the solution is Bitcoin.
Correct. That's the tie-in. You don't have to suffer inflation if you get on Bitcoin. That's right.
Stop suffering by Bitcoin.
Correct. JD, last thoughts?
They don't want you to be valuable. They do not want you to be valuable. Because if you are not valuable, then you are not powerful. And all of your worth and your power in the modern world is derived from the value that you're adding into it. And that is a beautiful thing. So go and grab anything and everything that you can do to add value and do it. Because that's what you're called for. Work is a good and beautiful thing. It is what we were created for. And it's not the reason we are loved, but it is one of the ways that we can show our love to those around us and to the world. So go do amazing things.
Love it. JD, you want to take us out?
Sure.
Or do you need me to do that now?
You did. Or you mean just push the button?
Peace. Thanks for tuning in to Better by Bitcoin. Bitcoin makes everything better. Like, subscribe, and follow us on X at BetterBYBTC, YouTube at BetterBYBitcoin. Not financial advice, mathematical certainty.